Today, I invite you on a fascinating journey through time to talk about a mysterious and exciting period in history, the Middle Ages. With its unique atmosphere and rich events, the Middle Ages represent an interesting aspect of our past that is worth exploring and understanding. I have compiled a list of intriguing facts for you that will undoubtedly reveal the unique characteristics of this era. Let's dive into the world of castles, knightly tournaments, magic, and dark mysteries that constituted the fabric of life from the 5th to the 15th century. Get ready for an exciting journey into the past. I will uncover secrets that continue to inspire imagination. Marriage in the church seems to be a tradition that has existed for many centuries. However, it was not always the case. In the Middle Ages, getting married in the church was not common. In the Middle Ages, marriage was not considered a formal sacrament of the church, so there was no need for a priest or religious rituals to solemnize the union. Those who wanted their marriage to be officially recognized usually did it at the church gates or in the churchyard. Contrary to common belief, couples did not require a priest, and no religious rituals were necessary for marriage. However, the medieval church wanted to ensure the observance of the marriage tradition in one day, and from the 12th century, they declared marriage as a formal sacrament. This declaration gave rise to the rituals and traditions we follow today. An intriguing fact is that in the Middle Ages, there were several reasons for divorce. One of them was if either the man or the woman had not reached the age of maturity. 12 for a girl and 14 for a boy. Other reasons included taking religious or monastic vows before, not being Christians, or cases of consanguineous marriages. Additionally, a lack of sexual harmony or the inability to conceive could be grounds for divorce. If a medieval soldier was wounded in battle, they had nothing to worry about. There were doctors ready to sterilize the wound. They didn't even need to pack anything to do it. As soon as someone got a cut, the doctor, following the recommendations of the king's personal surgeon, would take out their instrument and urinate on the wound. They also did this for cuts. Fresh urine was used to treat ulcers, burns, bites, and practically anything you could think of. It was disgusting, but it actually worked. The ammonia in urine could prevent wounds from getting infected, and in life or death situations, the humiliation was worth it. One of the craziest stories comes from Italian doctor Leonardo Fioravanti, who used his urine to save a soldier's life after his nose was cut off in battle. Fioravanti, thinking quickly, picked up the severed nose from the ground, shook off some dirt, and urinated on it. Strangely enough, the doctor managed to sew the urine-soaked nose back onto the man's face, and for the rest of his life, that man could smell through that nose, whether he wanted to or not. In the Middle Ages, there was a widespread belief that bathing could make you sick or cause various negative physical conditions, including nausea. This belief was linked to various factors, including religious beliefs, medical misconceptions, and social customs. Firstly, religious factors played a role. In many religious cultures, there were prohibitions on bathing excessively or taking overly long or frequent baths. For example, in Christianity, it was believed that a sinner's body could only be cleansed through Christian baptism, and regular bathing might be seen as excessive concern for worldly pleasures leading to sin. Secondly, medical misconceptions. In those times, medicine was not well developed, and there were various myths and misconceptions about health and hygiene. One such idea was that the skin was an exit for toxins, and bathing could open pores, allowing harmful substances to enter the body, causing diseases or nausea. Additionally, in the social aspect of the Middle Ages, it was important to maintain norms of behavior and status. There were widespread notions that excessive care for one's hygiene, including bathing, might be considered vulgar or indecent. However, it's worth noting that not everyone of that time believed in these prejudices, and some did emphasize the importance of hygienic practices, especially in excessively dirty and unsanitary conditions, where a lack of hygiene could contribute to the spread of diseases and epidemics. Childbirth has never been a joyful experience, but as terrible as it may be today, it was much worse in the past. In medieval times, doctors had limited ideas on how to save expectant mothers from death. Overall, the only thing they knew how to do was rely on divine intervention. Monks and midwives would sit beside a pregnant woman, praying and invoking the child to come into the world. Sometimes they fed the woman a mixture of vinegar and sugar and smeared her with eagle dung, simply hoping that eagle dung would help women survive. When magic failed, they just prayed for a miracle. For example, an abbey in Yorkshire consistently kept a sacred girdle on hand. Monks believed in possessed magical power that would preserve a woman's life during pregnancy. They were not the only ones who believed in this. When Henry III's wife became pregnant, he ordered the monks to bring him the sacred girdle. But it seems it didn't help much. Estimates suggest that 1 in 3 children died before reaching the age of 5, and about 20% of all mothers died in childbirth. To be fair, we have no records of mothers covering themselves with eagle dung and clutching a sacred girdle. After all that, it may not be too surprising to learn that people in medieval times had small problems with lice. Almost everyone in medieval England struggled with lice and fleas, from the rich to the poor. For some, it was a common practice to gather with friends and family to rid each other of lice. This was especially true for people who had to travel. Some crusaders left letters praising laundresses who came to them, saying that they not only washed their clothes, but were good as monkeys in picking fleas. However, the problem worsened the poorer you were. And it was not limited to England. When an English pilgrim named Marjorie Kemp visited a town of German peasants, she wrote home with disgust that the poor of Germany would spend evenings naked, sitting in a circle and picking parasites off each other. In the Middle Ages, when magic and superstition ruled the world, people faced various diseases and unknown phenomena that they couldn't explain. One way to get rid of them was trepanation of the skull. This was a surgical procedure in which a hole was made in a person's skull. It was believed that this method could expel evil spirits that, according to people's beliefs, could cause diseases and misfortunes. Within medieval medicine, there was a popular concept of templates of spiritual energy, or spiritual forces that could be influenced through manipulation of the skull or brain. Trepanation was considered one of the methods to expel or get rid of these spiritual forces, believed to inhabit the inside of a person's body and cause various diseases or behavioral problems. People believed that opening the skull would allow evil spirits to leave the body and the person would be healed. But in reality, trepanation of the skull was dangerous and often led to the death of the patient. Trepanation was practiced not only to expel spirits, but also to treat other conditions such as headaches, epilepsy, or traumatic head injuries. However, the effectiveness of these procedures was very low, and most patients likely suffered from complications. It was an extreme and dangerous procedure that often led to infections, bleeding, and other serious complications. Today, we know that diseases and misfortunes are not related to spirits and have scientific explanations. And while trepanation of the skull is no longer practiced, it remains one of the strangest and horrifying methods of expelling evil spirits in human history. Walling up was one of the most common and cruel methods of punishment for committed crimes. This method was used in various cultures and eras, aiming not only to punish the criminal, but also to deter others from committing similar crimes. This method was called live walling, or live burial. The idea was to enclose the condemned inside a wall or tomb and leave them to die of hunger, thirst, suffocation, or other unbearable conditions. It was an extremely cruel and slow method, where the condemned often suffered for several days or even weeks. In the Middle Ages, walling up became a popular method of punishment in Europe, especially in Spain and Italy. There, the criminal would be placed in a chamber, which was then filled with bricks or stones, leaving only a small opening for air and food. Such a method of punishment was particularly cruel, as the criminal could spend many years in the wall chamber until death from starvation or suffocation. The method was applied only in specific cases of particularly severe or socially unacceptable crimes, such as treason, the murder of a high-ranking person, or religious heresy. Later, possibly due to societal outrage and changing norms, this method of punishment lost its popularity and was replaced by more humane forms of punishment, such as execution by hanging or imprisonment. Live walling is now associated with medieval practices and is considered a cruel and inhumane method of punishment. The Middle Ages were a time when life was poor in entertainment. But even in such conditions, people found ways to have fun and distract themselves from everyday worries. One of these ways was attending executions. For many, it was quite an enjoyable pastime, comparable to modern horror movie outings. Watching an execution was a kind of entertainment and a way to pass the time. In a time when entertainment options were limited, people found pleasure in such dark and cruel events. Execution became a kind of show that attracted a multitude of spectators. Public executions were a way to demonstrate the power and authority of the state, a form of justice and retribution for committed crimes. They were held in central squares or city markets where people could observe them. Many members of medieval societies, especially those of lower classes, had limited opportunities for entertainment and meeting others, so they could view executions as events that allowed them to spend time outside their daily routine. However, many of them could also experience horror, disgust, or sympathy for the condemned. Executions were accompanied by cruel forms of punishment, such as executioner's work, hanging, crucifixion, or burning at the stake. These methods of punishment caused suffering and death in front of the audience. For example, Henry VII promised one of the organizers of a rebellion against him that if he voluntarily surrendered, no part of his body would be separated from him as long as he lived. He kept his promise. The poor man was suspended in chains from the church bell tower and slowly died over many days from thirst, hunger, cold, and finally from wounds inflicted by crows. And, as the king promised, his hands and feet remained with him until the end. The idea that executions were entirely enjoyable entertainment does not correspond to the reality of the truth. Such perception is based on a crude simplification and partially distorts the actual socio-cultural and moral values of medieval society. It is important to remember that entertainment norms and moral values change over time and differ in any era. In the Middle Ages, there were many different judicial practices, but one of the most popular and frightening was ordeal, or the so-called divine judgment. This type of trial was particularly common in Europe and was a kind of trial by ordeal, considered divine and not subject to appeal. Ordeal was applied in cases where there was not enough evidence to render a verdict, or when the accused denied guilt. In such cases, judges resorted to testing the accused to determine their guilt or innocence. Ordeal could take various forms, but the most common was the trial by fire or water. In the first case, the accused had to walk on hot coals or hold a heated object in their hands. If they had no burns afterward, they were considered innocent. In the case of the trial by water, the accused had to be thrown into the water, tied to a heavy object. If they didn't drown, they were considered innocent. If the suspect did not suffer serious injuries during the trial, they were considered innocent. If they received severe burns from the fire or other injuries, it was considered evidence of their guilt. Ordeal was based on the belief in the direct intervention of the deity. Thus, it was supposed to ensure a fair decision. It was widespread until the introduction of more rational methods of judgment, such as the presumption of innocence and the use of material evidence. Ordeal was extremely dangerous and often led to a fatal outcome for the accused. But at the same time, it was considered a divine decision and not subject to appeal. The Middle Ages are often considered a time of kings, castles, knights, and fair ladies, but this era was much more cruel and whimsical than many think. In this web of mysteries and struggles for survival, against the backdrop of the murky sunset of the Middle Ages, feats were born, sung by muses and legends for centuries. In the hearts of knights burned the fire of passion, their swords shone in battles, and the love of fair ladies inspired heroic deeds. In the darkness of the past, stars of courage and romance shone, reminding us that even in the most challenging times, one can find light and hope. After all, the history of the Middle Ages is not just dark castle alleys, but also bright rays of courage sparkling in the black ocean of time.